Greetings, greetings, welcome.
Good afternoon, good afternoon.
We are excited to have you all with us. Hello, Darnell, Angie, Danita. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, all right. Okay. So people are still continuing to to fill up the room, but we are going to go ahead and get started so that we can honor everyone's time. So first, welcome, welcome, Umoja Community College and University of California faculty and staff. We are excited to have you all join us in this professional development webinar. I too am a scholar, the Black student transfer experience from a California community college to a University of California campus. First and foremost, we would be remiss to not mention the injustice that the community is feeling in the non-indictment of murder charges for officers who recklessly killed Breonna Taylor. Unfortunately, a lack of justice due to the system of white supremacy is something the Black community is all too familiar with. However, it is something we, as in all of us, cannot be comfortable with. As we talk about how to best support Black students today, be reminded that supporting them also means being anti-racist and active in the fight to end white supremacy in the education system and society overall. A failure to do so is a choice that means you are complicit in the racism that negatively impacts Black students and communities, and are therefore ill-equipped to support Black students in any capacity. Your silence is negligence, and we implore you to use your privilege, positionality, and power to fight white supremacy in all spaces at all times. Our hearts goes out to the family of Breonna Taylor and all of those who are suffering right now at the lack of justice that we are witnessing. We're first going to start off by talking to you just about this partnership between Umoja Community and the University of California. Both systems established a working partnership to improve the process by which Umoja students from California community colleges are transferring into the University of California system. In the establishment of this partnership, several subcommittees were created to address the concerns with a multi-pronged approach. These subcommittees include professional development, UC TAP, a warm handoff committee, as well as data engagement. The committee of wonderful folks who represent the Professional Development Subcommittee Task Force helped put this webinar on today. And so we certainly want to just shout them out. I'll ask everybody to wave. So first, my name is Natisha Hudson. People refer to me as Tish. I answer to both. I'm the co-chair of the committee. I'm also a regional coordinator for Northern California Region 1 with the Umoja Community Education Foundation. You all can unmute yourselves to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Bianca Leon, co-chair of this wonderful committee. I'm Associate Director of Transfer Outreach and Undergraduate Admissions at UC Irvine, and it's so nice to see a lot of names, familiar names in the attendees. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Antonio Banks. I operate as the Umoja Regional Coordinator for Region 5, which is predominantly the Inland Empire, and I am happy to be a member of this committee.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Although I cannot see you, I'm going to wave and hope I'm going to imagine you waving back at me. My name is Dr. Jamal J. Myrick. I serve as the Director of African Student Programs at the University of California, Riverside, and I am excited to be in this space with you all today, as well as serve with my wonderful committee members.
All right, so just an overview of the format for the webinar today. We're starting with our welcome, and then we're going to go into student panelist introductions to let you know a little background information about them. And then we're going to dive straight into the panel discussions. So our panelists have 9 questions that they are going to discuss and answer about their transfer experience. And also just about their experience being students in both the community college and University of California system. You all then will have an opportunity to ask questions of our student panelists. Then we will hear a call to action from Dr. Myrick, and then we will close out with acknowledgements and thank yous. All right, look at these beautiful faces. I wish I could hear y'all, but they are so beautiful. So grateful and thankful to have these students. And so I am going to start with their bios. First, we have Kendra Smith. Wave, Kendra. So Kendra is a former Umoja student at Diablo Valley College. Shout out to DVC. I used to work at that college as well, which is how I know Kendra. She is also a recent graduate of UCLA, where she has earned 2 degrees in sociology and African American studies. She has returned to her alumna mater as a graduate student in the Department of African American Studies, where she is studying the evolution of Black women intellectuals in education. Kendra plans to become a college professor right after grad school. So all of y'all look out for Kendra. She's gonna need a job. So get connected with her. She is also the host of her own podcast series entitled Create with Kendra that brings inspirational and thought-provoking conversation of social justice, faith, and self-worth to her listeners. One of her greatest moments is to help others unlock their own potential within themselves, because knowing your own power and potential is a start of generational progression. Thank you so much for joining us, Kendra. I am also going to introduce Harold Grigsby. Unfortunately, he has class, so he cannot be with us in the physical, but we do have video of him answering the questions. Harold Grigsby III is an alum of the Umoja program at Sacramento City College, Umoja Sabah. With the help of Umoja, he was able to meet the requirements to transfer to UCLA, where he studied African American Studies and Public Affairs. He is now a JD candidate at Harvard Law School. Harold is pursuing his JD to gain a holistic understanding of the intersectionality and interdependency between law, government, labor, business, nonprofit organizations, and other sectors to ensure he is an effective change maker. His personal experience with concentrated poverty and the insufficient resources being raised in South Stockton has led to a sense of personal accountability to contribute to every community he has come into contact with. We are grateful to have Harold with us. And last but certainly not least, we have Chinetram Anagello. Excuse me, Chinetram. She is a former Umoja student of Fullerton Community College. Go Hornets. Her pronouns are she, her, and hers. And she is a current junior transfer at the University of California, Berkeley. As an intended African American Studies major, Chinetram found her passion for community and Black history working as a student program assistant for the Umoja program at Fullerton College, serving primarily Black and Brown students. Chinetram aspires to curate spaces that embody the Umoja practice of the porch in her future career endeavors. Chinetrum is both excited and honored for the opportunity to advise incoming Umoja transfers on the exciting and challenging journey that lies ahead at the UC level. Thank you so much for being with us, Chinetrum. And now we are going to dive right into our panel discussion, and I will yield to Dr. Leon.
Okay, so I will read off the first 3 questions, and then we will have the panelists respond. So the first question being, what do you believe faculty and staff at your community college assumed, either positively or negatively, about your educational or transfer journey? And as a follow-up, what do you wish more educators, either at the CCC or the UC institution, took the time to ask students, such as yourself, before, during, and after the transfer process?
And you can just go ahead and unmute yourself.
So I guess I'll start first. I think that when I first arrived to Fullerton College, I really was just kind of in a space where I really needed to be guided. I had no prior information to the community college experience or the necessary steps on transferring, let alone being within the institution. So I really was essentially looking for some compassion from my professors and from administrators and professionals on my campus. And within the first semester of attending my community college, I don't think I found that. And it was a pretty, I think, traumatic experience that could have negatively impacted my transfer journey. And it wasn't until, and I think a lot of those traumatic experiences stemmed from like negative beliefs on my transfer aspirations or my educational goals. And I just experienced so much of that within the K-12 system that I had this idea that higher education was going to be different. And within that first semester, I didn't really feel like it was going to be different. However, within the next semester, you know, by God's grace, I was guided towards the Umoja program, and I was able to kind of find a community that was positively receptive to my aspirations and my goals in my transfer journey. And I think that having that connection, without that connection, I don't really know what would have happened, because I wasn't really inspired to do much. I wasn't really inspired to continue going to school. And with a lot of the things that happen within pursuing your education, there's so many different things that can deter you, especially as a community college student. But having, you know, successful professionals around me and having students who are motivated, and also just seeing a sense of community where I was around people who look like me, it challenged me, and it also changed my life and changed my educational journey. So I think those are both the positive and negative things that happened within my community college experience in the beginning.
Thank you.
I definitely share the same or similar experience that which was just shared. My first semester in community college, I made amazing grades. Straight A's, you would think, well, that's great, Kendra. But the issue that I ran into was that I had no connection. I felt as if I was another number, and I was shuffling through that pipeline. And it wasn't until I was introduced to the Umoja program that I learned how to be a student. I'm a first generation college student. So when you go to community college, a lot of us don't know what's going on or how to do certain things. I did not know how to apply for financial aid. I didn't know what resources I actually needed and how to obtain them. So when I got connected with Umoja, they taught me how to become a student and how to get the resources necessary for my success. And so that is something that I would encourage everyone, if you are a counselor or in a position of resources, please push those things and don't assume that students ought to know. Or if you think they should know at least a certain amount of things, don't go on that assumption. Introduce it like you are selling a product that's going to pay your bills. So I would definitely encourage people just to invite students into that. And another thing that Umoja did was they challenged me. I can recall that when I came into community college, my objective was to be an occupational therapist as far as a career. But one of the counselors and the professors seen something in me that was, no, Kendra, yes, that's a good idea to pursue OT, but there is something bigger, there is something deeper and greater that you need to tap into. So I definitely appreciate them pushing and challenging me in a positive way.
Thank you so much for sharing and for your responses. So we'll move on to question number 2. Which is, in reflecting on your community college experience, how is being in the Umoja program instrumental to your success? And the follow-up question was, what additional programs, departments, and/or resources at your community college were helpful in your academic journey and how? And so we're going to show a video with Harold's response.
When I was at community college, I worked full time, so it's kind of work, school. And I think Umoja really helped me find that balance. Unfortunately, I didn't meet up to my second year, so I wasn't able to do a lot of the classes, which I think is the hugest part of Umoja. But it for sure brought that family aspect that I knew where my community was. I knew I could depend on, I knew I could lean on. And I think that's very important, especially community college, because you don't have a lot of direct support. We were able to go on different trips together, like Bonnie and Bodega Bay. We even got to go across the country to the South to go look at different HBCUs. I had never stepped foot on the HBCU campus. I didn't know much about them, and I was highly considering them at the time. And a lot of my core even ended up going to HBCUs for that, because of that solo trip. So like, I just feel like Umoja is kind of like that community that never goes away, that family never goes away. And I'm always willing to come back and do anything I can for Umoja, because they did a lot for me and my personal journey.
And to follow up with what Harold just said, Umoja does much more than give us classes. It does much more to get us from point A to point B, community college to a four-year university. But the Umoja program definitely is a place to where students are cultivated, not just as students, but as soon-to-be professionals. I can recall my first year in the Umoja program that I was invited to attend a regional conference. In attending this regional conference, I, along with another colleague, led a class of students. That were 60 people within the room. And that in itself is sharpening professional skills within the students. So the Umoja program is all that and more. If you are new to understanding what the Umoja program is, look deep into it, because we are some powerful people and we are in every corner of this country. Another resource that I did definitely utilize in community college was EOPS. And this resource gave, I know personally, I love the fact that I had a $300 book voucher. Now for students, sometimes our pennies are a little low. So when there's a resource that gives out, I see some comments, shout out to EOPS, book vouchers, that helps a whole lot for students, because some of our students are parents or may have car trouble or use a lot of their money in transportation back and forth from community college. So that is also important. Another part of EOPS, they had peer counseling and progress reports. So you had accountability as a student to meet certain requirements and be held responsible and accountable for those things.
Thank you. And our third question, what challenges did you experience in adjusting to a larger PWI? What assets do you feel you've brought into your experience?
Adjusting to a PWI wasn't that difficult for me. If anything, it was kind of the opposite. I feel like, at least on the surface, the PWI would adjust for me. I think my identity played a huge role in that. Because I'm a Black cis male, I didn't have to experience a lot of the issues that some of my Black LGBT folks or some of my Black women have to experience, as far as microaggressions and things like that. And I mean, it's simple things, as far as like, if I had been in class, nobody would interrupt me. Whereas like, I would see Black women get interrupted and I had to come in and step in and be like, hey, like, she's talking, or I'm walking down the hall, ain't no white kid finna just stay in front of me and they're gonna move out the way from me. I doubt the first time I did start to hear constant amount of stories from my Black women or from my Black LGBT friends about different experiences that at the time I just couldn't believe. I would hear stories and be like, damn, that really happened? Like, it was just so foreign to me, because as a Black man, I do think there's a level of kind of like fear they have of us, or intimidation. Not saying that's a positive, but it for sure allowed me not to experience some of the negative things a lot of my friends did at PWIs. So I do think it's important to acknowledge, as a Black man, like, while you may not have to face a lot of the different things people, some of our friends do, it is your job and your duty to kind of step in and speak on them and address them when you do see it occur, and make sure that people aren't getting taken advantage of.
Okay, and the other panelists, you're welcome to share whenever you're ready.
So I just thought that was such an excellent response from Harold, especially acknowledging the differences that our experiences may vary depending on the identities that we possess as a Black person at PWI. And I can definitely say, from concluding my first semester at a UC, that it was extremely challenging. And I think a lot of it had to do on the basis of that there were not a lot of Black students on campus. There is this belief that you're even a part of the campus. There was hesitancy to not only help students or help me because, I was a Black student, or because I was a Black queer woman, or because I was a transfer student. There's so many different things that come up in your ability to access different resources. And I think one of the greatest aspects of attending a UC, honestly, and a community college is the students. I think that being able to have conversations with different students and get to know about their experiences on campus really helped with the resources that I was able to find and the resources I was able to get to make my experience easier. There was a lot of, there's a lot of like alienation, especially at a UC, that you can experience with not being able to see a lot of students that look like you, one, in the demographics, but then, add that you're a transfer student as well, the numbers become smaller. So I definitely think that that was something that was challenging, especially coming from Umoja, where you're in a community that constantly feeds into you, pours love into you, gives you resources, whatever resources that it may be, to going into a space where so much of the resources are spread out and you feel like a small fish in a big pond. But just knowing that, or having those memories and those tools from Umoja, really helped in assimilating into a bigger campus and a bigger community. So.
So one of the challenges that I faced transferring to a PWI, I would say, is the audacity of entitlement. Coming into such a large space, attending UCLA, some people have their head way above their shoulders and feel entitled to speak and to move however they want without considering the consequences and not considering the offense that it has on other people. This is a story that and I'm going to make it very short, that I tell every opportunity that I have. I share this story. I was sitting in a sociology class, a class of 300 people. There are maybe 20 to 30 Black people. So that is 10% or less in a hall. So my professor wants to teach on Black Lives Matter, a white man from Denmark. He begins to read a text and impersonate a Black man. As he says, I'm going to impersonate this Black man. As he begins to read this text, he starts to use the N-word. My white counterparts around me sitting are laughing and snickering and enjoying this impersonation. It felt as a Black woman that I was sitting in a character performance, a minstrel performance. That in any way is not okay. Black students begin to get up and walk out of the classroom. A young lady stood up and addressed the professor. Don't you think this was offensive? Don't you see the Black students walking out? His response was, people walk out of my class all the time. It was not offensive. So what did I do? I had to collect myself, because there is one way you respond that gets things moving, and there's one way that you respond that allows people to stereotype you and put you in a box. I emailed everybody that I could on the campus to notify this professor. He was in the Daily Bruin within the next day. Also emailed him on the offensive language that he used and told him not to do it again. I came back the next day, sat in the middle of the lecture hall, did not pull out a pen, did not pull out a piece of paper, but watched his every move and how he was speaking about my people, if that makes sense. And what I want a lot of people to understand, if you are watching this, if you are here, hear me when I say Black people face this thing called imposter syndrome. This means some Black folks say, you know what? I don't know if I should be here. Some people experience it, some people don't. I take the idea of the imposter syndrome and I use it for my benefit. You think that I'm not supposed to be here, so you are comfortable enough to assault me and my people, but that is not true. But I also want you to understand, even though we may subscribe to it or not subscribe to it, it's something that we have to deal with. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Before I hand it over to Antonio to ask the next 3 questions, I do want to remind the participants that after the panelist portion or this prompted question portion, we will open up for Q&A. So you will see your Q&A button at the bottom. If you think of any as you're hearing the students speak, please type them in there. And then after this portion is when we'll draw questions from there. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Bates.
All right, cool. Thank you for that. So the next question I have for the panelists, and hopefully Janetram and Kendra can reply to this one, is, are there resources, programs, and/or departments that you discovered upon transferring to the UC that you feel would have made your community college experience a more intuitive and smooth journey?
So I definitely feel like I'm fortunate enough that most of the programs that exist at Berkeley exist at Fullerton College. A lot of them were similar. There's the Fannie Lou Hamer Center, which is a resource center for Black students. And the Umoja program had a center that was similar to that center as well. I think one center that I think definitely my community college could have definitely benefited in having was the Multicultural Center at UC Berkeley. It was definitely a hub for marginalized students to get together and just talk about classes. They also had different workshops and programmings that really spoke to the issues on campus, as well as created fun environments for everyone to get together and just kind of ease some of the social and educational stress that was happening on campus. And of course, I think that is something that, was beneficial to meet other people and to just talk about different other experiences and things that I might have not learned at any other programs on campus. So I think that that's definitely something that I think my community college would have benefited from. But most of the programs were similar at Berkeley.
So something that I took great pleasure in participating in when transferring to UCLA was the transfer summer program. Having that bridge program from my community college to UC, it was so beneficial. I learned the campus. The campus is huge. There are some places I still haven't been on campus, but having having the experience firsthand before we actually entered into the fall quarter was amazing. And that's another thing. I was used to having 16 to 18 weeks to do for a term. And in between 16 and 18 weeks, there is time for procrastination. However, transferring from a semester system to a quarter system, which is 10 weeks, is intense. So having that upper hand to experience the quarter system early was fantastic. So if the community colleges can implement something that is similar to a program, a bridge program during the summer, that will be absolutely amazing. Something else that I absolutely loved at my community college, there was a PUMA Center, which stands for Puente Umoja Mesa Achievement Center. So those were 3 different learning communities that we had on campus, and we all came to study there, use computers, resources, tutoring. However, I know sometimes space is limited at community colleges, but however, it is a possibility. I would definitely encourage my DVC folks, if you are on the line today, to consider having a Black center, a center for Black students. And I'll tell you why. Having the Puente, Umoja, and Mesa, these are 3 different learning communities, right? In one space. It was very limited to the people that we can have come in. And if you weren't a part of these programs, you weren't able to come in to use the computers or tutoring or any other resources we had available. And students want resources. That's what we do. We thrive on those resources. So having space for Black students that aren't necessarily attached to a learning community is absolutely important, because I can't tell you how many students go to work, go to school, go home. That is no way to utilize your educational experience. So having a center for Black folks, I would highly encourage.
All right, thank you both for those responses. The next question that we were hoping that you could reply to is, please share if you've ever experienced a moment during your transfer journey where there was a clear relationship established between a community college resource and a program or resource at the UC, and how did that positively impact you? So Harold sent in a response, and I'll share his first.
I think my 4 year did a very good job of ensuring that transfers were kind of catered to and asking the right questions. We had a very tailored program for transfer students called the Transfer Summer Program. It was a bridge program where diverse transfer students were able to come to UCLA and live there the summer before the fall started, and we were able to take real classes early and meet other transfer students and meet professors early and meet the counselors and kind of get accustomed to the campus and meet therapists. It was kind of just a mini UCLA for the summer just for us. And I think that took a big pressure off me. So by the time I started school, that kind of anxiousness was gone from moving to a new city and moving to a big school. Like,
So his video got interrupted, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go ahead and let Kendra respond.
Okay, so this is an excellent question. So there definitely is a difference between Umoja counselors and UC counselors. I would say for my Umoja counselors, they knew the students. And so they knew the right questions to ask, and they knew a lot of the students' background. And so there are even more custom and tailored questions and things they can pull out of the students. And that is absolutely important. If you are a Umoja counselor or if you are a UC counselor, getting to know your students is essential. And I know you may see 100 students a day. I understand, and that you may not have a lot of time, but the time you do have, make it count. Your jobs are so essential to what our experience is. And if you have the opportunity to look just even a little bit deeper into that student that is sitting across from the desk from you, do that. It counts, and we notice this as students.
So we'll go on to question 7. Tish, you want to take over there?
All right. Thank you so much for answering that, Kendra. So the next question, in what ways has your UC collegiate experience reaffirmed the Umoja principles, and how do you enact them in your current experience? So we'll go ahead and hear Harold's response first.
I hate to give UCLA so much credit, but they thing though, I can't lie. Like I said, the Transfer Summer program really helped me make connections and get familiar very early. They gave me a scholarship to go for free. They bought all of my cohort MacBooks. We have a black floor at UCLA, which is like a black dormitory like hallway that was all black students. That was like our kicking spot. Yeah, I think every school does need some type of Umoja program on campus. Or like a Black Resource Center. We actually just received our grant for one. When it'll come, who knows what people be playing. But yeah, like I said, you said you did a pretty good job. I would say what they can improve on is outreach. Simply as put, it's hard to be what you can't see. I didn't personally know anyone who transferred to UCLA, so I didn't know the possibility. The only reason I applied to UCLA because I found out about the blue and gold opportunity plan, was pretty much at all UC. And if you don't know this is what I'm talking about, outreach. At all the UCs in California, if your parents make under $80,000, your tuition is free off the bat. I wasn't going to apply to any UCs because I thought they were just more expensive state schools. But I heard about that. I said, shit, why not shoot my shot? So I applied, and I ended up getting UCLA. If that type of information was more out there, or UCLA reps kind of visit us more, especially like we're Umoja, like we're the group that gets Black students to transfer. Why aren't UCLA banging out our door to talk to our students? Why isn't Davis banging at our door to talk to our students? Again, if you see it more, you could believe you can do it. So I think, again, no matter how much work or whatever you're putting in, if you could see it more, it makes everything feel more real. So I think all the UCs, all 4 years, could work on their outreach a lot more, whether it's in predominantly Black neighborhoods or reaching out to community college students, like especially Black students in the Umoja program.
Yeah, I think there were so many important points that were reached in Harold's video. And I think the number one thing was definitely outreach. And unfortunately, I definitely would say that my institution doesn't do enough to outreach to Black transfer students. And I think it's evident in the ways that the transfer center is set up. So my first semester at Berkeley, I took a transfer course, and within the transfer classes and within the transfer programming, I kid you not, it was only me and another Black transfer I just so happened to meet in one of my classes. And that was literally just a random happening. And if I had not had met my friend, I would have not been able to connect to anyone who shared similar experiences. And that's within the transfer center itself, which is a center that is corresponding at a community college. So you would think that there would be some sort of correspondence between the transfer center and between Umoja on how to properly care and talk to and help Black transfer students within the institution, as well as within the Fannie Lou Hamer Resource Center, which is a center for Black students. There was a lot of amazing programming that happened where you could see, Umoja practices like the ethics of love and connecting to the African diaspora happening within the programming that was put on by students. But as far as seeing, the careful conversations and inquiry from Umoja counselors or Umoja professionals within that Black space, I didn't really see that. And I think that's something that my institution could definitely improve on, because till this day, I haven't really seen or attended a transfer event for Black transfers within the transfer center or within the Black Resource Center or the Multicultural Center. So yeah.
Thank you, Chinetrum. And I believe question number 6 about counseling was not answered. So this question, how does Umoja Counseling Services compare to the academic advising process at the UC level? So we'll go ahead and hear from Harold.
The counseling service was superior. It was more personal. I wasn't just going to see my counselor, I was going to see someone like a mentor. And typically because community colleges are smaller, like we're a first name basis, you know why I want to transfer, you know, a little of my family, you just know me, you know, where I feel like at UCLA at times I was kind of like a number. And the personal is just, it's a huge school. So I would see different counselors for different things. And I'd had a time to build that connection or that rapport where like in Umoja, you're Black, first of all. So we already have a instant connection there. And it's more intimate, it's more personal. You're seeing me in the process. Where at UCLA, I feel like they kind of feel like, oh, you made it here, so you're gonna be okay. So it's not as much attention to detail. So I do feel like Umoja Counseling Service was far superior.
All right, thanks for going back, Antonio. And I think we are now on question 8. What elements do you look for in resources and programs in order to feel comfortable in getting involved with them? Go ahead and unmute.
So Kendra, did you want to go first or did you want me? Okay. All right. So I think the most important thing within a program is consistency, transparency, community, and accessibility. Those are the 4 things that I look at whenever I'm pursuing a program on a campus. I think when, you know, there's not enough consistent effort to, you know, get to know your students or to make sure that your students know that these resources are available, you know, it doesn't come off sincere. And accessibility, when, you know, there's advertising and outreach to every student population and even overarching outreach to the further community who aren't like UC students or just, you know, just people who want to have these resources and could benefit from these resources are available. And of course, community, when you go into the space, people want to know your name, people want to know your story, people want to help you, want to make you feel as if you belong in this institution. Because like Kendra pointed out, there's definitely those consistent feelings of imposter syndrome. There are so many different things that are telling you that you don't belong there. And it's easy to fall into those voices within yourself. It's like, you know, I don't belong here. So when you have programs who can not only make space for you as a transfer student, as a Black transfer student, to assure you that those voices are wrong and that you do belong here, and they want to create a community of people who support that as well, I definitely think that that is such an important thing for not only professionals to want to share and create for their students, but to also have within a program.
That was beautifully said. And just to add to that, when it comes to these programs, it's the people in the programs. All of us here collectively run a lot of things that are going on our campus. And so the very things that I would ask of you all is that be relatable. Even if you are not a Black woman or a Black man, you can still be relatable. I had a counselor in my Umoja program at DVC. Her name was Yvonne Canada Clark. This was a white woman that and the thing about it is like, it's not about you being Black or white. It's being, can you relate to me? Even if you can't relate to me, can you listen to me? Can you understand with me? Can you empathize with me? Can you be patient with me? And so those are the things that I would definitely say that are really important. And also, how can you support your students? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Go out and find money for your students. When it comes to books, when it comes to scholarships, or anything that you can think of, go a little further than you usually do for your students in getting those type of resources.
Thank you, Kendra. Thank you. Yes, we know the money is always important. And so our last question before we enter our Q&A, and just a reminder, I put it in the chat. Please ask our student panelists some questions. Use the Q&A box on the bottom right side. And then once we get to that, we will read your questions and have our student panelists answer them live for you. This last question, what are some specific ways that colleges and universities can better support Black transfer students during their first year? And we'll hear from Harold first.
So going back to transfer resources, like I said, I think UCLA did a pretty good job of being intentional about catering to the transfer student population. I think we have the biggest transfer population in the UC for sure, and maybe the state, I'm not for sure. So they're pretty prevalent. We had a transfer center that was like a hangout spot for transfer students. You can get your resources and things like that. We had a transfer dorm. I never heard of this before. We had a dorm where pretty much you can't live there unless you're a transfer student. What else? We had transfer representatives on every pretty much school board there was, every club, every program. And like I said, the biggest thing with the Bridge program, the transfer summer program, we held a community college day where potential students would come visit UCLA and we'll kind of show them the experience that we were going through and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty prevalent. They did a pretty good job.
So I think that one way that colleges can really benefit from supporting or to really cater to Black transfer students. I think at my university, there's so much work to be done in trying to make space for Black students, let alone Black transfer students. I think within our orientation programs, I was a spring admit, so I showed up in the middle of the semester. And even in the orientation process, there wasn't really much on the transfer experience or the different things that you could maybe reach out to as a transfer student, if it wasn't just the transfer center. So I think that's one thing, is just trying to be more transparent about the resources that are available to transfers and the transfer experience within the orientation process at whatever time of the year that it is. The second thing was for the Black resources on campus to have more programming and more events and more professionals, more student spaces for transfer students at the university to have a voice and to create programming around our experiences. Within the semester that I was there, as much as the semester I was able to experience, there wasn't any programming catered specifically to Black transfer students. And if there was programming, if there was mentions of Umoja, it would be in passing in between students as like a memory, like, oh yeah, I was involved in the Umoja program and I'm now at Berkeley, but there wasn't necessarily a space for Umoja Berkeley students to get together. So I definitely think that that's something that the Black resources on campus can do better. And lastly, for the transfer center is to have Black professionals, Black students working within the center to be able to talk about their transfer experiences. Because when you don't see anybody that looks like you within the process, you start questioning if you were even a part of the process. So I think Berkeley has a long way to come in terms of fixing the microaggressive anti-Black climate for Black students in general, but also for Black transfer students, how to just even communicate about the transfer experience. Oh, and one last thing, I'm so sorry, is that the clubs on campus are very exclusive, and exclusive in anti-Black and also exclusive in internships and resources. And a lot of those internships and resources aren't advertised to Black students, and they're harder to obtain obtain for Black students. And if you don't have the right connections, a lot of like, you know, classism and elitism, it's hard for you to get into these clubs and to gain the opportunities. I mean, some of these clubs don't even rush to Black students, so let alone transfer students. So fixing the stigma around Black students, fixing the stigma around transfer students, because it's actually harder to get opportunities at Berkeley if you're a transfer student. So usually it will just kind of be a silent part of your student identity for you to get opportunities. So yeah, a lot of work, but I definitely think that it's possible through y'all, through professionals who are passionate about Black students, passionate about Black transfer students, passionate about Umoja. So, yeah.
So true. Oh my goodness, we share the same sentiments. I can't even tell you how many times I have been, there's this pathway from the dorms to on campus is called Bruin Walk. And so this is long hill where different clubs and organizations, they table and they pass out pamphlets. I can't tell you how many people see me and held their pamphlets close like this. I'm not passing you anything. Come on now. But to answer the question, definitely outreach is so important. Outreach, outreach, outreach. I can definitely say one of the reasons why I attended UCLA was because of the Black transfer community. There was an opportunity for them to fly me out from the Bay Area to Los Angeles. I stayed in a dorm with Black transfers. We had orientations, we had games, we had classes, we had a tour of their many different and monumental places on the UCLA campus that we were shown, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his speech on Jan Steps, or the 42 number for Jackie Robinson, or where 2 Black Panthers were gunned down in Campbell Hall. So we had it was called the People of Color Tour, where people of color had very historical moments on the campus. So things like that is important. Listen, all UCs and community colleges, if you have a chance to do something similar for your students, do it. I was not going to it, I promise you. Kendra Smith was going to an HBCU. I was going to Howard University and you couldn't tell me nothing. But the Lord had different plans for me and I ended up at UCLA, and it was that experience, the Black transfer experience that I got a chance to to experience or foresee being a Black transfer at UCLA. So that is absolutely important.
Thank you all so much. So now, and first of all, that was fantastic. You all should be doing seminars and webinars and all of this stuff, because this is fantastic. And I hope all of our attendees are taking notes and planning to really take their answers back to your campuses, your programs, your departments, and really reflect on what they're saying and how you can start to implement and institutionalize their suggestions, how you can change your services that keep in mind what they said and maybe improve the way you are supporting or approaching services for Black students. So now I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Leon and Dr. Banks to facilitate our Q&A portion.
Okay, everyone. So just a reminder, make sure that you utilize this opportunity to pose any questions you have to our student panelists. We really want you all to take advantage and make this learning opportunity what you need. So if you have had questions where maybe you are looking to better serve Black or African American students at your campus, or maybe you have something that exists but you wonder how you can improve it, please utilize this opportunity. As we only have a couple questions in the Q&A as of now, I'll go ahead and ask the first question from Tanya Williams Bradford at UCI, my campus. As a Black faculty member in the business school at UCI, I am troubled that more Black students are not in my courses. Would it be helpful to have some sort of seminar to connect with Black students outside of the business school? So if either of the student panelists would like to share, just unmute yourself.
Oh, Kendra, do you want to? Okay. Kendra, do you want to go? No? Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. Outreach outside of the business school. I think there's a lot of intimidation in regards to STEM, and people really don't, people really just feel like business and engineering and science and technology is always outside of them. But I feel like when you're able to get out within the community and just see what folks are interested in, it really will give you such an amazing opportunity. And I think outreach is something that you can never do wrong. It'll always reap in some sort of connection. And I think one really amazing thing that Berkeley offers is they have BESA, which is like the Black engineering group. And they also have a lot of like Black folks within the business school, as well as within the STEM programs. So there are folks who reach outside of the programs to connect with people within the Writing Center and then people within the Black Resource Center. So, and then they ultimately come together to outreach with the students. So I definitely think in working together and working outside of our respective schools is always a good idea and could reap some amazing benefits.
Yes, and if I can follow that answer, this is actually an issue, just not you as a professor, but for Black business students. I know my fiance, he attends San Jose State and he's a business major, and he always tells me, I cannot find Black business, professors. They're not there. I don't know where they are. And something he shared with me was that he would like, even if the Black business professors would go to where the Black students are, go to the Black Resource Center, go stop in on your your time off to sit in a class, an African American Studies class, or wherever the Black students are. Meet them where they are and let them know that you are there. Even if they don't take your class, that you can be a resource, you can be a mentor for them.
All right, so I have the next question here, and this is from Cecilia. Hey, Cecilia. The next question is, how can community college transfer centers best connect with and support Black students early on in their educational journey, especially in this remote environment? What are some things you know now about the transfer process that you wish you knew in the first or second year at the community college?
Something that I wish that I knew at community college, that UCs are intense. They are intense institutions. And a lot of the time, I had a professor that said to me that my name is Professor so-and-so. I am not willing to learn your names. I will not learn your names. If you have any questions, please talk to your TAs. I see your face, Ms. Dr. Leon. Yes, this happens. So I wish that I knew that before, but hey.
Kendra, I think that intense was such a perfect word, because intense would definitely be the word I would use in the letter to my past self. Is like, with these aspirations, of course you are able, of course you are worthy, but it is also super intense. And I think that definitely something that is important and is needed to ease the anxiety of attending a UC or attending another institution outside of community college, is really having those transfer summer programs, or having representatives from these colleges come in and hold questions and talk in be relatable, not just talk about all the things about how to get a degree, what programs to enter, you know, all of these important and necessary things, but also talk about your personal process within the universities, how it shaped you as a person, the difficulties that you had in obtaining resources. Be real about it, because sometimes when we see these end goals, I'm pretty sure, you know, future me will be looking at past me and like, wow, like you have all these degrees. I'm sure that, you know, you just knew exactly the resources to obtain and exactly what to do, and it wasn't intense at all. But being upfront and being real about the obstacles that exist in obtaining these resources and obtaining these opportunities in that crucial point of transferring to a UC, whether it be in the summer or whether it be a short-term program at the end of fall, whatever it may be. Those are essential to really creating success for students, because I think the most essential thing is resources, academically, of course, but the most influential and most important thing is believing that a student can be successful is ultimately the biggest thing to them being successful.
And if I can add give me 1 inch to answer the first part of that question. Please acknowledge what's going on in our community. Just as Tish acknowledged all of what's going on with Breonna Taylor's case before we started, that acknowledgement is important. I had a professor this past quarter, this is a good professor report, that acknowledged COVID, the Black Lives Matter marches, the many deaths and killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, acknowledged that, and then also gave us, you know, an extension for our work. Because as Black people, we go out into the world and think, will I come back home? So when things are high like that, it is important to slow it down. We are going to meet your midterm. We will turn in that paper, but give us a time to breathe and to be. That is something that I would definitely encourage for consideration.
Thank you. So the next question is from Joey at UC Irvine SOAR, the Student Outreach and Retention Center. He asks if you can share any programs or offices you attended at the UC level that were beneficial for your retention, whether it was academic success, mental health, professional development, financial wellness, campus belonging, any of those, and how centers can continue to get better with intentional programs for Umoja students.
So I think it's really easy, especially completing my first semester at school and within the whole COVID crisis. And actually, before I even get onto that, I just really want to say, like, Kendra, that was such an amazing response. I definitely agree with you that like professionals and students, professors all need to give space and acknowledge the difficult and unique experiences that Black students face within the classroom, because we're more than a number, we're people, and we not only attend this institution, but we're living lives. So I definitely think that that was such an important point. And now I'm forgetting the question. So could you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
So can you share any programs or offices you attended at the UC level that were beneficial for your retention, whether that be academic success, mental health, professional development, financial wellness, or campus belonging, and how centers can continue to get better with intentional programs for Umoja students?
Okay, great question. Thank you for reading it off again. I think that a program, you know, I'm honestly unsure if it's a program or if it's just an offset of like a club, but there is this program called BRRC, and essentially they help with Black students being retained at the university. They do outreach to high schools, or they do outreach to the greater community, and just seeing the students that were involved in that program and seeing how committed they were to the success of Black students and the retention of Black students really retained me, because it's easy within this COVID crisis to be like, okay, well, I just finished my first semester. I could easily just take a break off of school and rediscover my passions. And I think that's essentially something that I really am trying to point at in attending, particularly UC Berkeley. And I think any Berkeley student will let you know that the most treasured and most amazing part about attending this institution are the students. And the students that make up the BRRC are incredibly committed. And I think seeing that and seeing the way that they were pouring love into their communities and love into other students was really, really helpful for me. Especially another thing I would say is the programming done by within the Fannie Lou Hamer Resource Center. The programming was really good, and I would hate to not be able to have access to that or to experience that, and to be within spaces that were really fostering a lot of healing. And I think healing is definitely, you can never have too much of, especially when you attend these UC institutions. As a place to just like rest your head, because everything else is important. But if you're not saying like in your space healing, then the rest doesn't really matter. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I'll pause it for a second. The next question that we have is, what would our panelists say about pushback against offering services geared towards Black students only, stating the need for inclusivity?
Oh, I was waiting for this question, and this is an excellent question. So, first thing I want to say is, if anyone has the heart of, I don't see color and I'm colorblind, I will highly encourage you to reconsider that statement. Being colorblind is a dangerous thing. And I don't mean to be funny, but what do you do at a stoplight when you see the red, the yellow, and the green? It is important to see my color, because it is important to see my identity and how I show up in the world. So when you say, oh, Kendra, that didn't happen to you because you're Black, that didn't happen to you because you're a Black woman. Yes, it did. And even though we are fighting for these different things that cater to Black people, you have to understand that K through 12 and the world that we live in does not cater to Black people. You mean to tell me that we cracked open from K through 12 all the history lessons that I've learned? We never learned about slavery. We never learned about Oklahoma being burned down with all the Black businesses. We never learned about different Black figures. We never learned about slave rebellions. You mean to tell me that Black history is not American history, but it's not in our books? So the fact that we want things that are catered to Black people is not saying we want to be pushed away, but we want this knowledge, we want this understanding, we want these resources, and we want you to see us. Because when you don't see our Blackness, you don't see us. So even though, you know, we want to be inclusive, yes, but look at where we are. Look at where we are. And if our Black students are not being retained, if our Black students are not being protected, advocated for, given resources, then we need to target who? Black students.
Yes, yes, yes. That was a word. Thank you so much for that. To that question, what? Like, I definitely think that, you know, when someone says, will Black spaces alienate other voices, other spaces, I would really ask them to reconsider everything in their lives and reconsider everything that they know. Because if we're truly knowing what we should know, then we would know how essential Black spaces are and needed for Black students. I think that it's dangerous when we don't address and correct, you know, questions like that, as like, why is there the need for Black spaces? There's not a need. Most popularly, when you hear that statement, you hear like, you know, well, we should also have a white space. But you know, when we're living in a country, when we're living in a society that is influenced by white supremacy, there's very little truth, there is very little space in understanding that a lot of the reason why we even have that question as to why Black spaces are needed is because we've never known how little space that we had, because we've been socialized into thinking that everything that we have in this society is everything that we need, when we're not being served in the ways that we should be, when we're not having the spaces that we should be, when we're not having, you know, the space to unravel and to be listened to that we should be. So I think one thing that can be added into that question is when people ask, why do we need Black spaces? We should ask also what we need within those Black spaces is we need Black people, we need Black spaces, we need changes to how applications and how many Black students attend these institutions. It's such a multifaceted thing. And I think that it could be answered and there could be plenty of questioning and ways to answer it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Again, excellent responses. Our last question is, do you feel that now with the Black Lives Matter movement, that we are on the right path to equality for Black students?
So in response to this question, are we on the right path for bringing, what was it, equality to Black students? Was that the question, bringing equality to Black students?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I'm pulling it up. It was, do you feel that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
With the Black Lives Matter movement, that we are on the right path to equality for Black students?
So to answer this question, we have been in this fight for a long, long time. The Black Lives Matter movement is my generation's of movement of the Black Power movement before, or the Civil Rights movement before that. And so we are just another generation fighting for these rights. Yes, we have come a long way, and yes, there are many things that we have achieved, but I also want to remind us that we have an even longer way ahead of us. So this isn't the end. We are not, you know, pulling up to the glory station, but we have a lot of work to do. And what I see is that is absolutely beautiful in my eyes is that there are more than just Black folks out there working for equality, but I see my white brothers and sisters, my Latino brothers and sisters, you know, my East Asian brothers and sisters out there fighting for, and it's human rights, right? It is human rights, but it's specifically for Black folks. So if we take that energy, and not everybody is going to go out with a picket, with a sign in the streets, and I'm okay with that. But we need people to keep that same energy when you're in the classroom, or on Zoom, or in your respective professional spaces, because Black Lives Matter isn't just out in the street, but it's when you're at work, when you're at the grocery store, when you're interacting with your colleagues that feel it's okay to say the N-word. So why would you think it's okay for you to say that in front of me? I have to check myself to understand, you know, why do people think it's okay to use offensive language in front of me? So Black Lives Matter, that movement is going to be everywhere you go.
Yes, yes. I definitely think that Black Lives Matter needs to be something more than, a way to protest, but it needs to be a way of life. Black Lives Matter is a livelihood, and it affects every single thing that you do, from the way that you teach, to the things that you buy, to the things that you say, to the people that you're around. So I definitely think that that is, a livelihood that should, be influenced within throughout your whole life. And is Black Lives Matter a representation of equality? Is it a sign of that we're moving towards a post-racial society where Black people will be fully recognized as full, complicated human beings? I think that it's a step in the right direction, but I think there's a lot of things to do in order for us to get to the space where we truly believe and hold space and recognize that Black people are not being treated and not receiving the same access to society in the way that we think. And I think that it starts more when, I think Black Lives Matter has become kind of performative, because you can have a Black Lives Matter sticker in front of an office of, let's say, a white educator, and they could be saying a lot of anti-Black stuff. And you could have a Black Lives Matter pin in front of a Black educator space, and they could be totally misogynistic and homophobic and transphobic. So I think when we're able to really translate Black Lives Mattering into what we do, what we say, and what we read, as opposed to a conventional way of representing our politics and our beliefs, then maybe we'll be able to transcend into equality and equity.
Yes, thank you both so much for your honest and genuine responses. We are so honored to hear you today and have you. I wanted to share with everyone that I wanted to make sure that Kendra and Chicharam were aware that this was a safe space, and that, if it came to sharing things that were not, fun to hear or enjoyable to hear, that was okay. As professionals, we need to hear that and use our power to make change in the positions that we have. So again, thank you so much. We're going to transition out of our Q&A, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Banks to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, so once again, Kendra, Chinetram, thank you for those powerful words and insights about your journey. I know that it's definitely informed the way that I will be practicing in the field, and hopefully the audience as well has been able to take a few gems that she dropped. Hopefully they pick them up. What we're going to do now is transition into a speaker who's with us today, and he kind of holds like a unique position as it pertains to the UC Umoja partnership. We have Dr. Jamal Myrick. He is a higher education scholar practitioner who is passionate about creating access and opportunities for underrepresented students. Dr. Myrick is determined to contribute to higher education by offering his scholarship to increasing diversity in higher education and student affairs through policy and programmatic initiatives. Since being introduced to the Umoja community, Dr. Myrick has been a pivotal advocate in furthering the mission of this cause at the University of California. In this effort, Dr. Myrick has served as a reflective and responsive thought partner in the UC Umoja partnership by way of participation in several subcommittees seeking to make the transition from community college to the UC a more effective and comprehensive experience for African American and all students. Without further ado, UC and Umoja family, please welcome Dr. Jamal Myrick to share a call of action with you all.
Oh, wow. That was a wonderful introduction. Oh, my goodness. So again, my name is Dr. Jamal J. Myrick. I'm the Director of African Student Programs at the University of California, Riverside. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be in this space. I love working with my co-conspirators, my co-collaborators on our committee. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for sharing out some knowledge. If you didn't know, they were really out here dropping a lot of gems. And so hopefully you've been picking up some free jewelry today, because that's literally all they've been dropping for since we've been on this call. And so I'm inspired, I'm impressed, and I thank you all. And I raise my hat, if I had one, to you all, because you offered a lot of great knowledge. Next slide, please, Antonio. Dr. Banks, excuse me. So one of the things I learned in my doctoral program is about this art of reflection. And so, yes, this is a professional development opportunity. Yes, I'm going to give you the call to action, and I'm excited about that. But before you actually take action, before you actually jump into what the next thing is, I really want everybody to pause for a second and ask yourselves the following questions. Is supporting Black transfers important to me, and why? Right? Because I think a lot of times we want to do things. We're like, yeah, we get fired up because it's Black Lives Matter and there's a lot of tension on campuses and things along those lines. We're fired up for it, and we want to go forth and prosper and make sure that all of our scholars are feeling engaged and supported and welcomed. And then a year or two later, it's no more. Right? So really ask yourselves why you want to do this work. Ask yourself why you want to support our Black scholars. And then do a checks and balance. How do you know? Right? So if I sit here and say, oh, I do all the great things for our Black scholars, I do everything, but not one Black scholar can tell me anything that I've done, that's a problem for me. So, check your markers. Like, is it in the retention? Is it the conversations and the relationships that you have with Black scholars? How do you know that this is important to you? How do you show it? And more importantly, do others see it? Are they able to talk about what you're doing? And then also, what part of today has resonated with you, right? So we've had, when I say amazing speakers today, we had amazing speakers today. What part of what they said spoke to you? Is it hearing the story with Kendra and the faculty member and all the forms of anti-Blackness and that little bit of story that she shared a little bit earlier? Or what is it, maybe Harold, when he said, you can't be what you can't see? Right? Like, those are things that stuck out to me. And so when I hope you all are taking these free jewels that you just got today and really take it back to your campus. Because I think a lot of times when we have these professional development opportunities, we feel good about ourselves, we get riled up, and then we just kind of stop. And so I really want to encourage you all to really do some self-inventory, some self-reflection, and then move forward. Next slide, please. And I'm trying to be mindful of time. So if I'm kind of zooming through, I apologize. I can stay after a little bit if we need to. The picture that you see right there is a picture of Santorini, Greece. By far one of my favorite places in the world that I've ever been. And thinking about a call to action today, I noticed the format is a little off, but in recognizing the call to action today, one of the things that I thought about was actually a flight. I thought about the process of getting to Santorini. And so when I talk about the call to action, I'm breaking it up into this framework here where it's the pre-work, right? And when we're talking about supporting Black scholars in all of our different areas. So I recognize that we have faculty on here. We have UC administrators, community college administrators, Umoja administrators. And so I want to make sure to put out at the forefront, like, I recognize that we have different folks, different stakeholders. And you find your spot, find your level of influence when I'm kind of moving through. But when we're thinking about Black scholars, think about the pre-work. So before we even begin recruiting, before we even do the work, so to speak, we have to do a checks and balance. And then you get to the airport, right? So that's how are we preparing our Black scholars for the courses and the experiences. So you heard our speakers talk about how they wish they knew about some of the resources that's available to them. They wish they knew other Black folks that are on the campus, right? So thinking about that. Then you have the takeoff. So how are you getting them prepared for the transition? And then landing. So how are you ensuring that they're getting to their goal? So again, I want you to think and use your imagination, right? Use your imagination from when you are trying to get your ticket to your flight to when you actually land. Move forward, please. So pre-work. So, when you're on kayak, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to book your ticket. You're looking at prices, looking at the climate. I know for me, I look at what is that space like for a Black person, right? That's how I when I go and travel, I really do look at that. And I'll ask my colleagues in my community, hey, like, have you been here? Same thing when we're talking about trying to recruit Black scholars. I want folks think before you even create a recruitment plan, before you even think about, hey, I want to do the outreach that our guest panelists just spoke about today, we got to do some checks and balance. So what does our office, our department, our organization actually know about Black transfer scholars in your respective areas? Right. So am I at the University of California, Riverside, am I saying, oh yeah, all of our Black transfer scholars are just having a fantastic time. There's no microaggressions. There's no levels of anti-Blackness. Okay, well, move forward. How do I know that? How do I know how our Black scholars are experiencing my department, in my office? Right? What are they saying about my office? What are they saying about my staff? What are they saying about their experience here on this campus at UCR? Right? Our guest panelists also shared how they want to see themselves in the programs and services. They want to see themselves in the marketing. Can you go to one of our websites? Can you go to our website, African Student Programs, asp.ucr.edu, quick plug. Can you go to that website and actually see Black bodies on there? Right? So thinking those things through. What do we know as some of the barriers and obstacles that our Black scholars encounter on our campus? Right? What policies are in place? Right? Where are the trouble spots? What are the hot spots, as I like to call them, that our scholars are encountering? And then how do we know? Again, a lot of times in higher education, we try to just say, oh yeah, we do all these great things, but how do you know? Yes, you can have the quantitative data, that's fantastic, but that doesn't give you the full story. And so again, doing the checks and balances, getting assessment, right? Asking your scholars. You have two fantastic scholars on this call right now that gave you free jewelry. I guarantee you should be doing the same thing with your scholars on your own campus, right? So ask those questions of your scholars. And then what are we communicating to future scholars? Are they being seen, right? So paying attention to those pieces are all important of the pre-work. So that's not even doing the outreach. Next slide, please. So now we at the airport. So we're here. I'm trying to get ready. I got my Starbucks popping. I'm ready to get onto the flight. So I'm at the airport. So meaning we're now doing the outreach. So what information are you telling these Black scholars? What are you telling them about advising? What are you telling them about support services? Are you telling them about your respective Black faculty and staff association like we have at the University of California, Riverside? Are you telling them about some of the other regional coordinators in the Umoja program that could potentially serve as support? So maybe Dr. Banks doesn't connect necessarily this well with this particular person. Can he pass them to Tish? Right? So thinking about the resources that you have, are you telling your scholars that? What type of network or support is available to engage scholars? So we talked about programs and services and the BRRC, right? So what are some programs and services and networks that's available, not just on your respective campuses, not just in your organization. So for example, if Dr. Banks had a Black transfer scholar come into our campus here at UCR, he knows that he can reach out to me, he can reach out to African Student Programs, and we're going to make sure that we touch base. He knows that, oh, I can reach out to Allure in undergraduate admissions and touch base to make sure our scholars are feeling supported. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, there we go. So we're at takeoff. So now our scholars are on our campuses. Now we have engaged with our scholars. Now our scholars are doing their thing. So your scholars are on campus, and sense of belonging is essential. You've heard that so many times in this conversation today. So how are you creating a sense of belonging? How are you creating a sense of mattering for your Black scholars in whatever capacity that you serve in? What are you or your departments doing to reduce barriers, right? So financial aid, mental health support, academic difficulty that they encounter. For example, I know at UCR with us African Student Programs, we actually get grade reports, and we followed up with all of the academic college deans to say, hey, you have 5 scholars in the College of Engineering who are on academic probation. What are some of the interventions that you all are doing to support these Black scholars? Right? What are your spaces doing to connect and engage and reduce the barriers that our community is facing? Have you connected them with the Umoja program, the Umoja office? So you heard a little bit about that earlier. Where's the network of faculty and staff support? And then also being mindful of your locus of influence. I think a lot of times we look at other folks and we're like, we want to do that. We want to do that. Do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have the structure to do that? Do you have the finances to do that? Right? Like I recognize that UCR, we are going through a budget crunch right now. So it has forced us and challenged us to rethink how we engage with our Black scholars, not just when they get here, but even before they get here. Next slide, please. the landing, right? So the landing because I recognize that our audience and our stakeholders on this call are occupying a variety of different spaces. So again, hear me out. So let's say the warm handoff, Tish just talked about it a little bit earlier. I learned about it last year when I first got introduced to Umoja, and I love that idea. I love that theory of the warm handoff. How are you making sure that your scholar in their next transition, they're being supported and they're taken care of, right? So if you're part of the community college spaces, how are you making sure that you're creating a warm handoff with us as far as the undergraduate admissions folks, with the Black resource centers at these spaces, right? So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, if Dr. Banks knows that he has a scholar that's coming to UCR, okay, he's going to put the scholar in touch with me. He's going to put we're going to make sure that the scholars is in touch with undergraduate admissions, that they have the resources that they need. And then also keeping the lines of communication open at all times. So Dr. Banks knows, hey, he can always reach out to me. It doesn't matter what time, what day it is, he can always reach out to me, and recognizing that scholar, like we know that scholar's name. So I can say, oh, here's a quick update on this particular scholar. Next slide. And then I know I'm kind of moving real fast, but also recognizing and continuing the work of Umoja, right? And so I love the idea of Umoja. I love that we're partnering with Umoja the last year or so, and we're going to continue to do so here at UCR. But if you didn't know, Umoja means unity, right? And so I want you to sit with that and think about, how are you creating unity amongst these Black transfer scholars in your area and your campus or your organization? And what does that mean for you all, right? Our scholars have continuously shared like the impact that Umoja and the Umoja principles practices has had on their experience. And I want to direct you all to three that that really come up for me and I see in our work in African student programs at UCR. So the first is everybody's business, excuse me. And one of the things that we say on our campus and within our community is it's village business. So the success of our Black scholars is not just relegated just to my office. It's not just relegated to Laura Davis's office in undergraduate admissions. It's everybody's business to make sure our Black scholars are being supported and they are navigating the community, not just here on the campus, but also in the external community, right? So it's everyone's business. We all have a part and a role to play in these scholars' success, right? The idea of mattering. So again, you've heard multiple times today the importance of making sure our Black scholars feel seen, heard, and recognized, to the point where I can say, oh yeah, that's Kendra. I remember Kendra. I met Kendra at this event. I met Kendra at the Summer Bridge event. I met Kendra during the UCR ASP Tap In campaign, right? So again, making sure that our scholars feel connected and they feel engaged. And then finally, language is power. If you notice today, I've been saying scholar. We want to make sure that our scholars are leveling up. They're not just part of the banking system of education where we're just giving them knowledge. Y'all just learned so much information from our scholars on this call today. And there's a lot of knowledge that we can share amongst each other. And then recognizing the power of language, recognizing the power of empowering our scholars and engaging our scholars and making sure that we're uplifting and encouraging our scholars. And so in terms of the next steps, really think about the pieces that I just kind of outlined today and continue to come to the professional development opportunities that this committee will be putting on throughout the academic year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Myrick. Everyone who is still on, thank you so much for sticking with us. I know a lot of people had to head out for other commitments, but we do have some closing remarks and acknowledgements to give you more context as to how this all got put together and coordinated. I do have one action item for all of you. I recognize a lot of my colleagues' names from previous positions, for example, at DVC and other community colleges. But I know you all already have a role in this. I know a lot of you that are on here, we're kind of preaching to the choir. So the action item that I really wanted to ask of all of you is to think about who's not here. Think about your colleagues that you work with who have made some comments or made some decisions where they weren't keeping this community in mind. And next time you get an invitation to our next event, share that with them. encourage them to join us when we share out the recording for this session, forward that to them. That's something easy that you can do to help continue this work. In terms of acknowledgements, I do have a few, so please bear with me. We would like to thank and acknowledge the leaders of the UC Umoja Partnership, Executive Director of Umoja, Nzinga Duga, Sandra Williams-Hamp, the Executive Director of Partnerships and Community Engagement at the UC Office of the President, the Umoja Community Education Foundation Board and staff, Umoja Community Program Coordinators, counselors, instructors, mentors, and student support staff for their unwavering love and support for the Umoja Scholars, Umoja and UC Scholars for continuing to remind us that supporting Black and African American students is both an honor and a responsibility. The Division of Student Affairs at UC Riverside, Associate Dean of Students, Shantae Thomas at UC Riverside, all of the Black Resource Centers putting in the work at UCs to get our Black scholars through these campuses, and Lisa Walk, Senior Events Manager at UC Riverside. And I'm going to hand it back to Tisha, who had a final comment.
Yeah, so thank you all for providing us grace, giving us an extra 5 minutes over. This was a very lively discussion. We did get a question about reaching out to these fantastic student panelists. So thank you again to Kendra and Chinetram. I will let them put their contact information in the chat box if they are willing to be contacted by all of you. And I also want to implore you to utilize your budgets to pay for student speakers. So we love having student speakers. We love engaging them and having them conduct webinars and things, but think about the ways that we are, compensating them for their time. And so I just wanted to drop that if you are interested in having them speak, please be also thinking about a budget that you can provide a stipend for them for their expertise. Once again, thank you everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar series. Have a wonderful day.